Hi, how you doing? And welcome back to another video on the channel. Bit of a different video today because the assistant manager chip is now active from game week 24 onwards in FPL, and on the surface it looks a little complicated, quite a lot to get your head around. So I thought it'd be a good time to make a video to A, break it down and hopefully simplify it, and then B, give my advice on how to maximize it for you and your team. So if this video does help you out and you are new around here, please do subscribe. Honestly, it is really appreciated. We're a small channel trying to grow, so we are really grateful for all the support we can get. So let's take a look at some key points with the assistant manager chip. And I think first and foremost, it's important to understand that you are renting a manager. So it does take up some of your budget, but once you've finished with the manager, you get that money back. And then whilst that manager is in your squad, he scores points for your team. It's also important to acknowledge that it's active for 3 consecutive game weeks, so it has to be used in a block of 3 game weeks. You can't spread them out. You can't just say, oh, I want a manager for the double game week 24 and then another manager for another double game week later in the season. It's got to be used consecutively. So you don't use a free transfer fee to get your first manager, but you do if you want to swap them within those 3 weeks. But if you do play it in a double, it's not for the matches, it's for the game week. So let's say you play it in game week 24, you'd get 4 matches from your manager in those 3 game weeks, as opposed to just 3 matches in a normal spell. So it's also important that you can't use this chip the same time as any other chip. So it's something to be aware of, as it'll block out 3 weeks where you can't use anything else. So sure, you could save this for a double game week, but aren't you going to want something like your triple captain or your bench boost, free hit or wildcard during those? It's just something to think about when planning ahead. There's not even that many double game week opportunities this season. My advice would be don't let a double game week cloud your judgment. Last season, the best would-be point scoring managers were actually in single game weeks, just where they scored big against other opposition. So just don't leave this chip and another for the last 3 weeks of the season. Otherwise, you'll be in a bit of bother because you won't be able to either play them both or maximize them both. So this chip is in addition to your 11 players or 15 players that you have in a squad. You don't have to sell a player to make room for your manager, but it does take up your team quota. So you can't have 3 players from a certain club and a manager from the same club. It would have to be 2 players plus a manager for a triple up. So I wouldn't use the chip on a team I'd want players from. I'd just get 3 players from that team instead. I think I'd get a manager from a lower team because in 3 weeks they're out of your team and you don't need to use a transfer to sell them. They get removed automatically. Whereas if you were to get a player from a lower team just for like a 3-week time frame, you'd have to use a free transfer to sell them later on at some point, and that could disrupt the flow of what you're planning to do with your team. So all the managers are priced between 0.5 and 1.5 million, and it's part of your budget, so you do need to set some funds aside to get the manager. Managers from supposed weaker teams, they're cheaper, and the more expensive managers are from the supposed stronger teams within the Premier League. So the way the scoring works is that your manager will get 6 points for a win, 3 for a draw, 2 for a clean sheet, and 1 for every goal. So I think that's great, but then you also need to acknowledge that if the manager is against a team who's 5 places above them in the league, they'll get 10 extra points for a win and 5 for a draw. So that'll typically mean that a manager from outside the top few teams is better, mainly due to the bonus points potentially gained. I think the upside from such a manager is massive, and you're unlikely to want 3 players from lower league teams anyway, so it's a lot less likely to disrupt your usual transfer plans. I think whichever FPL manager wins FPL or wins your mini league will likely get a ton of points from this chip, hitting it big at the right time. In a nutshell, I think you really just want a manager who has home games against out of form teams higher up the league table. So I think it leads us on to options for this game week. So whether you choose to play it or not is your call, but I'll do a video on this every couple of game weeks or so and offer my thoughts as if I was going to play this chip myself for my own team during that time frame, and hopefully it'll just give you some advice every so often on when you could use it and who you could use it on. So here are some of the best options as if you're going to play it for double game week 24. I'm personally not likely to use it, but if I was, I wouldn't go for Arne Slot from Liverpool. This kind of links into what we were saying before, because it's really easy to get 3 Liverpool players in your squad. You know, I don't want the Liverpool manager and 2 players, because the Liverpool players are likely to score well on their own. So who are the managers we can get that aren't Liverpool? So with that in mind, I'd much rather go for David Moyes from Everton, because Everton players, they're a lot less appealing to put in your starting 11. If you could have played this chip in game week 23, Moyes would have got a massive 19 points in that game week alone, because he beat Brighton, who were more than 5 places above them in the league, got a goal and a clean sheet. So not only do they have an extra game in the double, you also have the balance of an easier game against Leicester and a high upside game against Liverpool, both at home. After that, it's Palace and Man United, who are currently 3 and 4 places above them as it stands in the league table. So if that gap can get a little bit bigger, both those games have bonus points potential as well. The problem will be, and this is kind of the same in any game week you play your manager chip, is that once you activate it, you can't cancel it. So you'll be making, these games and hoping that it's a bit of a risk that they'll be in the bonus range or outside the bonus range by the time they come around. He's only won 0.5 million, so you don't have to cut aside much budget from your transfer funds, and hopefully everyone can afford a manager that's $500,000. My second option, if I was playing it in game week 24, would be Marco Silva. Now, Fulham are having a great season, and although Newcastle away isn't the easiest fixture, it does offer bonus potential, which is kind of what we're looking for to hit it big with this chip. And Newcastle did lose 4-1 against Bournemouth recently. They play Forest, who it's fair to say have overachieved so far this season and are maybe on a little bit of a wobble, and that game is at home. So it gives Fulham that extra advantage for those bonus points. And they then round it out in the third game week with another home game against Palace, which, whilst it isn't the easiest game, having home advantage once again is an important factor to consider when using this chip. So that's my initial thoughts. Hopefully it's a little clearer, and I've tried to break it down quite simply. You can always go back and pause the video with the key points earlier just to go over and refresh it. And I think it's looking as far ahead as you can. I think a lot of teams will swap positions in the league later on in the season, so it's really difficult to look at this chip and say, I want to play it in game week 30 on this manager, because you don't know how all the teams are going to line up and whether there's going to be bonus points or what the form's going to be like and injuries. So I think you've just got to take it as it comes. But the main thing is try and plan in when you're going to use your other chips as well. And then you don't sort of get this logjam where you're trying to play too many chips at once and it just doesn't quite work out. So let me know if I've missed any managers that you think would be really good to play right now. And if you've got any thoughts about when you're going to play the assistant manager chip, let me know in the comments. It's always good to get different people's opinions, especially when it's a new chip and none of us really know what we're doing with it. We're all trying to work it out. I think this time next year, it'll be a lot clearer on what to do with it. So thank you very much for listening. Hopefully you had a good game week in game week 23 and you're looking forward to game week 24. Please do subscribe if you're new around here, and I will see you in the next one.